And welcome to our special edition pop-up show here on the Elite Sports and Entertainment Network. Stat guy Dustin Reese here, joined with Jay McLovin. Jay, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing well, man. Ray, talk about some NFL stuff. I mean, there's been a lot of crazy NFL stuff that's going on. By the way, I did want to put out, and I think we also put out, hey, tonight is, I believe, Game 3 of the World Series, right?
Yeah.
And it's also Monday Night Football. That's a hard decision. What to watch? I'm watching the World Series. I don't like the World Series because my Astros aren't in it, but I'm going to watch it.
I don't think it's that hard of a decision at all. I'm going to watch the Lions and Raiders because this is the first Monday night home game the Lions have had since they were in the Silverdome.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And actually, the Lions are on my defense, so I need a big time. Hey, Dan Campbell, if you're listening to me, I need a big time game from the Lions tonight on the defensive side because if I do well tonight on defense, then I can take out Frankie, stat guy in fantasy league. So I need a big night from Detroit.
Is he beating you right now in fantasy?
Barely. He's done. So he can't put no more points up, but I still have defense. And right now the score is 111 to 107. So I need 5 points on defense, and I'll win. 5 points, Dan. 5.
One interception.
Five.
One interception will get that for you.
Hey, that's what I'm hoping. But no, this trade deadline, man, Dustin. There's a lot of moves I was seeing. Or not a whole lot. I won't say a lot, but there have definitely been some trade deadline moves.
I guess the biggest ones today, one was a trade and one was more of a free agent signing. But this morning you saw Leonard Fournette finally basically signed with the Buffalo Bills pending a physical. That's something that's been talked about, for the last 3 weeks to a month since he's kind of worked out with, I think 5 or 6 teams was who he worked out with. And it just seemed like Buffalo was the one team that wanted him the most. I don't know why it took so long to get to this point, but everyone knows about Leonard Fournette. He was once a top 5 pick. He was number 4 pick by the Jags back in, I think, 2016, I believe, maybe 2017. And first 3-4 years in the league, he was arguably the most productive back during that stretch. And then all of a sudden you get to 2021, started to fall off a little bit due to ankle injuries and things like that. Got with Tom Brady in Tampa where, yes, he wasn't the same person he was, but he was still a very productive running back, especially in the playoffs. And for a team that historically has struggled to run the ball minus Josh Allen, I think adding him to that running back room with a guy like James Cook, it kind of gets you that thunder and lightning combo that might be able to take some of that running load off of Josh Allen a little bit.
Yeah, and that's what I was telling a friend of mine who's actually a Buffalo fan, and he was asking me what I thought about it. And I said pretty much the same thing. I said, he said, well, how much could Fournette really help us? And I said, well, look, no, I think he'd help you out a lot. I mean, your run game, James Cook is doing an okay job. I don't want to throw him completely under the bus, but also at the same time, he really hasn't put up like great numbers, right? I mean, he's not getting you Eckler numbers. He's not getting you, McCaffrey type numbers. So at some point, I'm just saying, you got to do something. And I think Fournette's the kind of guy that can spark that run game. Now, I do think a little bit is on their offensive line stat guy. I mean, they don't create as many holes as a lot of other backs are getting. And that could be one issue. How do you think Fournette's going to do with Buffalo? Is he really going to make that huge jump, or is it just going to be a little bit better than what we're seeing?
I honestly don't think he needs to take a huge jump. And what I look kind of for in Fournette in this situation is he's going to be, I think, their third down back and their short yardage back. Like if it's 3rd down and 4, you use him as kind of a pass blocker because he's a better pass blocker than what James Cook is. If it's 3rd and short, 4th and short, if you're in one of those goal line situations, you bring Leonard Fournette in because Leonard Fournette's about 234 pounds as opposed to James Cook being 210. They both have different running styles. They both have different styles of play where they excel at, where James Cook is one of those running backs that kind of needs to get in the open space a little bit more. He needs more blocking because he's not as strong as Leonard Fournette, where Fournette can kind of take something and turn it out of nothing, basically, where it looks like you might have him stop for no gain, and he can turn it into like 3, maybe 4 yards just for fighting for those extra yardage. And ultimately, I think that's been one of Buffalo's biggest problems when they've been in the red zone is they don't have like that short yardage red zone back that you can count on to get you 2 or 3 yards. And I think that's ultimately what Fournette's being brought in for at this point is he is that short yardage guy that can get them those yards that they haven't been able to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really, because we've talked about Buffalo before, and I know I've said that, and I know you said it, that I felt like that was the one component of that team that really could boost this team and hopefully get them over the hump. And I hope I say his name right. I'm gonna say, how you say one guy there, Paluca or Panache or whatever that guy's name is, the dude over there with Kansas City Chiefs, Pacheco. Thank you. Like Pacheco does with the Chiefs, right? Or what Mostert and them are doing with Miami. I mean, you need to have somebody there that can give you something on that run game so you're not so much one-dimensional. Because I'm going to tell you, it's a problem when Josh Allen is damn near almost always your lead running back and your quarterback. That's a problem. So I feel like, if Fournette can give them something better than what they're getting, I mean, that could be the component that can help them get out of where they are. Because right now, yeah, they're quote unquote the at the top of the division, but are they really? I mean, Miami's still right there with them. Honestly, they haven't really. I don't think they've really truly 100% separated all the way and said they're clearly dominant over Miami.
I mean, Miami's winning that division by 1 game right now.
Are they on by 1? Okay, they may be up by 1.
3 losses. Miami's got the 2.
There you go. I mean, and that's it, right? I mean. I feel like that run game is what's holding them back. I'm not going to say that they don't need a little bit of more defensive help, but really I feel like, they got all the components on offense, right? You got the quarterback, you got, good wide receivers, you got a good tight end and Knox. It's not like you don't have good stuff. It's just you don't have a damn run game. And so it makes it a lot easier if you're going to play Buffalo to just stop the dang run game. If you stop the run game, then you can start, doing other things to try to mess up what Josh Allen is doing. Maybe you could double team some of the like Stephon Diggs or something to make it a little bit harder for him. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do to really stump a one-dimensional type team, right?
Exactly. And the other big trade just happened probably less than an hour ago, and that is the New York Giants, who were kind of the Cinderellas of the NFC last year with Brian Daboll, basically taking a team that was dead in the water for 4 or 5 years, coming in there in year 1 and turning them into a playoff team. Obviously, you were kind of seeing that sophomore slump that they always say when a coach has a really good first year and then they kind of struggle that second year, and you're really seeing that this year with the Giants especially. But the Giants have traded away Leonard Williams to the Seattle Seahawks. And this is after the Seattle Seahawks signed Frank Clark a couple weeks ago. And with the San Francisco 49ers now losing 3 straight games, the Seattle Seahawks are now winning the NFC West at 5-2. They're right up there with Seattle and have the second best record in the NFC with Detroit. And because they beat Detroit in week 2, they have technically the number 2 seed in the NFC right now. And adding Leonard Williams and Frank Clark to an already solid defense, Seattle is very quietly turning themselves into one of the teams to beat in the NFC.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, those throwback unis were pretty nice over Sunday, man. I don't know how much you got into it, man. I mean, I like the fluorescent colors that they have on their new uniforms, but I really like that old school Seattle uniform. It looked good to see it back out there on display. I haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah, I think that's something that I was actually talking about my dad last night. I think there needs to be, because you have in the MLB, you always have like that the City Connect uniforms that teams wear, and you always have like those special players only weekend jerseys that teams wear. I think there needs to be like a dedicated weekend, whether it's in September, October, November, December, whatever. I think there needs to be a dedicated weekend where all 32 teams playing have to wear some sort of a classic throwback jersey.
Right. And by the way, Bud Adams, if you're out there, let Houston rock the Oilers blues again. I mean, I don't know about you, that guy, but I miss the old school Oilers uniform. And when I saw it this past weekend on the Titans wearing the old school.
That's the problem, though. Houston Texans can no longer do that.
Yeah.
Because the Tennessee Titans franchise is the original Houston Oilers franchise, so they have the rights to those jerseys.
No, they do, but Bud Adams could give up that rights, though, and let No, that's my point. That's why I said hello.
Yeah.
I said if only Bud Adams, if you can hear me, you should release those uniforms and let Houston have that right back. I mean, I'm just saying, man, it hurts my soul to watch somebody wear our uniform that has nothing, not even one. Look, Houston is all about oil. We're all about oil, and that's why it's a derrick. That's why there's an oil derrick on the uniform. It just seems weird seeing Tennessee walk around with oil derricks on their uniforms. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about Chase Young, man. Jeez, man, is this guy gonna get moved or what?
Whew. Right when I think he is, you see performances that Washington put up against Philly yesterday.
Right.
Where all of a sudden Sam Howell looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the league against a very good Philly defense. He threw for 4 touchdowns and basically pretty much went throw for throw on basically Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts obviously played a little bit better, but Sam Howell was outplaying Jalen Hurts for about 2.5 to 3 quarters. And then you see performances like that, and you're like, every week that Washington plays Philadelphia, for whatever reason, they give Philadelphia problems. And then you have to look at it like, where is that kind of performance from Washington every single week? Because if they could play that way every single week, Washington would be a playoff team hands down. The thing with Chase Young is they declined his 5th-year option before the season started, mainly because of his injury history the last couple of years, which basically kind of gave you the sense that he was going to be on the trade block from week 1. He was going to be one of those players that Washington would try to unload and get something for him as opposed to losing him for nothing. But now when you look at where Washington is, yes, they're 3-5, but they're really not out of the playoff hunt quite yet, because like you have your 5 teams that are clearly the best teams in the NFC. And then there's a group of 4 or 5 teams that are kind of in that 6 and 7 seed range, which is where Washington is sitting. And if Washington wants to have any chance to sneak in as that 7 seed, they need Chase Young. They need Chase Young on that defense to make plays. They need Chase Young and Montez Sweat to wreak havoc on opposing quarterbacks. And at this point, I think Washington does hold on to him, and maybe they try to re-sign him to a cheaper deal next year, but I just don't know if he gets moved in time.
Yeah, and that really is, because I mean, the front 7 of Washington really is playing at an amazing level. I mean, I was kind of wondering if they were even going to be able to find room for Chase Young on there, but it looks like they have, honestly. What do you think about that front 7? Do they really need him? Could they make him expendable for other maybe pieces that they do need?
I think they need him for this year. I think you're looking at next year, depending on where Washington picks. I think you could see them draft his replacement next year. But if that's ultimately what your goal is going into next season, then you really have no choice but to trade him, because then you can get different assets for him. And maybe you can pick up another 2nd round, 3rd round pick that you could package into a potential 1st round pick later in the 1st round.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me hey, Linda says we're coming in loud and clear on Roku. Sorry about that, Linda. He didn't know not to put Roku on there. Northeast Streaming Sports. It was Dustin's little FUBU. Dustin, you're a bad boy. You put the wrong tag on there. We weren't supposed to be on today. Never mind.
I just clicked on all the things on there.
I know you did, because you're a sweetheart. It's okay.
She can fire me.
No, Linda, we don't want to be fired. His words are not that of this sport. You're gonna get us fired. No, hey, let me get back to Chase Young real quick, man. Honestly, on Chase Young, to me, he is a huge force when he's healthy. It's when he's not healthy that's the issue, right? So I'm like, as long as he's healthy, I'm gonna keep him in there. I'm gonna put my best studs on there and find something else, right? But can you rely on him the whole season? That's really the talk of the town is, can Chase Young stay healthy the entire season?
Yeah. And now the other team I want to focus on right now, and I think you know what's coming, is the situation in Minnesota right now. Minnesota looked dead to rights about a month ago when they were 0-3. Then they picked up a win before losing to Kansas City, and they were sitting at 1-4. And at the same time, they lost Justin Jefferson in that game. You kind of looked at their upcoming schedule with games against the Packers, games against these other teams, and you were kind of starting to pencil in Minnesota could be 1-7, 2-6 at the trade deadline. And then you're starting to kind of list off names like Danielle Hunter, Jordan Hicks, Byron Murphy, Harrison Smith, and a lot of these players that are on 1 or 2 year deals that you could start seeing Minnesota trade away to maybe kind of start tooling for the future. And Kirk Cousins was another name that was being mentioned in the trade conversation just because he has 1 year left on his contract. He's playing at an MVP level right now, and any team in the playoff hunt would kill to have Kirk Cousins. Guess what? Minnesota has all of a sudden won 3 games in a row. They've gotten to 4-4 and have put themselves right in the middle of the playoff picture. Plus, their next 5 games are New Orleans, Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, and Vegas. A stretch of 5 winnable games where theoretically, if you get average quarterback play at best, you can win all 5 of those games, or at worst, go 4-1 and you're sitting at 8-5 heading into the month of December, which is going to put you right in the middle of the playoff picture. The problem now is Kirk Cousins just tore his Achilles tendon. And not only is he done for the rest of 2023, but he's probably done for 2024, because if you're looking at a minimum 12-month recovery process, the earliest that man would be able to come back next year is middle to late November. I don't see anybody even trying to sign him next year, knowing that they might not even have him for the first 2/3 to 3/4 of the year. And if this is how his career in Minnesota ends, it's going to be very painful, because Kirk Cousins is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion. He's a guy that constantly people like to crap on just because his record is what it is, when they don't look at the numbers that he puts up. They don't look at what he's been doing on the field this year and what he's been doing on the field last year. They just look at that win and loss record and pin it on him, when 90% of the time it's not on him. So if I'm the Vikings right now, there's 4 options that you realistically have, and I kind of want your opinion on the options. Option number 1, see if Matt Ryan or Carson Wentz are willing to sign a 1-year veterans minimum contract for the rest of the year.
I like the Matt Ryan. I do. I'm not a big Matt Ryan fan per se, but I do think, like you said, you don't have to have great quarterback play. You just have to have, basically, let's just call it what it is, game management. It's just game management at this point. And at this point, I think that's all you really need. You got a guy like Justin Jefferson. You have what's that other tight? Hawkinson. Yep. So you got Hawkinson at your tight end spot. Those are really your 2 big key weapons right there. And you got Addison.
Addison right now is stepping up too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Addison is finally coming into his own on the run game. So, yeah, I mean, I think Matt Ryan, if you can coax him out of retirement, which I don't think it would be too hard. I think that dude's probably wanting to get back in the game anyway at this point. So, and I think you get him on a cheap deal. You don't even have to even pay that guy a lot. Maybe you put him on a 1-year deal. Because, look, let's be honest, you're not going to rock with Matt Ryan the whole time. You just needed to finish out this season to where you can figure out what your future is next season. So, yep. You can get him on a cheap one. Not even a full year. What are we talking? 10 games?
Yeah, you'd have to still give him a veterans minimum, but
no, you'll give him a full year's salary. But I'm saying,
because you're halfway in, I think the deal would be, $1.4 million is what Matt Ryan would get for the rest of the year.
Okay, so what's $1.4 million for those guys? Yeah. That might as well just be $1.75.
Yeah,
I mean, for us it'd be like $1.75. So $1.4 million is if it saves your season, if not even. You never know. Maybe something magical happens during the season. You never know. I mean, teams can get hot. I mean, if you can go with Tim Tebow all the way to the playoffs on a team that, probably wasn't meant to be in the playoffs, let's just be honest.
Right.
I mean, how far can Matt Ryan take this group? He has. It's not like he hasn't been in the Super Bowl, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I'm just saying.
And then option number 2 for Minnesota at this point is you look to trade for a veteran backup. And some of the options that I look at is Jameis Winston, because New Orleans basically has Derek Carr locked up for 3 years, and then they have Taysom Hill backing him up. Jameis Winston's on a 1-year deal, so he's kind of disposable for them. You look at Andy Dalton in Carolina. Andy Dalton's another guy that's had a lot of success as a starter. He's on a 1-year deal in Carolina, so he's kind of expendable. Jacoby Brissett, even though I don't see Washington get rid of Brissett because he's their primary backup, and if something goes wrong with Howell, you need him. But the other one now that I'm very curious to see what happens is Ryan Tannehill. After what Will Levis did to Atlanta on Sunday,
oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't think Levis is sitting the rest of the year. You still have Malik Willis there, who's got 2 years left on his rookie deal. Ryan Tannehill is in the final year of his contract this year. And if you look at the similarities, Tannehill and Kirk Cousins are very similar in how they play football. And I think Tannehill would be a great fit if Minnesota would pull the trigger to bring him there.
Hey, and I wouldn't be upset either because what he did and what him and DeAndre Hopkins have done and the way that they were able to link up, trust me, I need this every single week. I'm just trying to say, Will, I need this every week. So go ahead and let Tannehill right off into the sunset. I'm perfectly okay with that. Let's get some more Will Levis in there, and we're going to be good. Or I call him Will Levi's. But come on, let's go.
Option 3, which I think is going to be the most likely option for Minnesota right now, is you roll with Jaron Hall in week 9 because he was your 5th-round pick this year. He's been the guy that's basically been Kirk Cousins' backup all year, so he knows the system. He knows the reps.
Right.
Nick Mullins, who was the backup from Minnesota last year, has 31 or 32 career starts over his career. Most of them came with Kyle Shanahan in the 49ers. He's on injured reserve right now, but he was in the system last year and knows this system. And then obviously you have Sean Mannion on the practice squad, which is something I don't want to see. So like we were saying, if you can be a game manager, the next 5 games are very winnable games. So if Minnesota decides to go with kind of a Jaron Hall, Nick Mullins type of situation, I'm not going to be overly opposed to it just because Nick Mullins can win you games. And we don't know what we have in Jaron Hall until we can see him play.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Mac from Mac Sports on Northeast Streaming Sports says, no worries. We had the slot open. You can do this every time, stat guy. So apparently we're not fired. Apparently, I guess Stat Guy has gotten us locked into some kind of weird Monday at 2 p.m. slot every week now. Good going, Stat Guy. You got us some work. You got us some work there. Yeah? Hey. What does it say? Ask for forgiveness, never permission. Is that what they say?
You're retired. You need work.
I do need work. I got to do something, keep myself busy. Not that the VA does it. No, but hey, let's get on to another one real quick, man. Derrick Henry, since we're talking about the Titans a little, or no, actually, we didn't really did we wrap up the Minnesota one already?
No, the other one I was going to say.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to skip over that. I apologize.
The other one I was going to say is pretty much if Minnesota wants to tank at this point, I don't think anyone's going to blame them. I just don't see the Vikings doing that when you look at the veterans that are on this team. But if Minnesota really wanted to tank and go for a guy like Michael Penix, I don't think anyone's going to blame him. But I think the more likely scenario right now is you roll with Jaron Hall, you roll with Nick Mullins, or you try to get a guy like Matt Ryan or Ryan Tannehill.
And I haven't really looked at the standings well enough to know who's actually dead last in the league right now. But I'm pretty sure New England is right there with you guys, and they're not even trying to tank. They legitimately are just that bad.
Yeah, now that you said New England, I would take Bailey Zappi.
Yeah,
I'd give Bailey Zappi a chance in Minnesota.
I mean, like you said, he's got weapons there, and he's got a good offensive line, so maybe he can actually do something with that particular team. I honestly think if it was me, I'm not going to try to tie too much into Baylor Zappi. I think Zappi might cost you a little bit more than that little 1.4 you were talking about from Matt Ryan. I still think Matt Ryan is the best term solution right now for your problem. And then if you want to be competitive, right? If you want to be competitive, I think Matt Ryan gives you the best chance and with the least amount of obligation or resources tied up into it.
Yeah.
So I would go with option A.
So now we'll go to Derrick Henry, since you were talking about him.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's a tough one because a couple weeks ago I said the Baltimore Ravens should look to acquire Derrick Henry to pair him with Lamar Jackson, knowing that J.K. Dobbins is hurt, knowing that a lot of the running backs that Baltimore counts on are not healthy. And I figured you pair Derrick Henry with Lamar Jackson, that's going to be such a nightmare combo for defensive coordinators to prepare for. It could make Baltimore the team to beat in the AFC. Now, all of a sudden, you go and see what Will Levis did yesterday. It doesn't make sense for the Titans to trade away Derrick Henry because if Will Levis can even continue to play at half the level that he played at last year, Tennessee may not make the playoffs because they've kind of put themselves in a big hole right now. But then you have something to build on for next year with Levis and Derrick Henry.
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking. Like, do you really want to if Levis is the guy, and you know, Stag Guy, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. I mean, it is one game, but it was one game that he performed well in. But if this is indicative of what we can expect out of Will Levis going forward, and if this guy is the next guy to be the quarterback of the Titans, then why wouldn't you want to give him the best options available? And right now, Derrick Henry is better than any other or any other running back that's either A, not off the market, or B, that's going to come out of the draft. I still think he gives you the best chance to win, and he's still young enough. Look, I'm not saying you're going to get 20 years out of the guy. I think you get maybe another 5 years of production out of Henry.
I'd say 3 productive years, but I think he'll last for about 5 years just because the pounding his body took is going to catch up to him eventually. I think you get maybe 2 to 3 productive years out of him, and then the last couple of years he might be more of that short yardage running back, just trying to stay in the league, kind of like what Frank Gore was doing towards the end of his career.
So I would say you either have one or two options. Either A, you trade him now for picks and try to get what would you think that Derrick Henry would be worth in picks? Like, would it be a second rounder? I don't know if he's quite a first round because, like you say, he's only got about 3 more years left in the gas tank at that level, right? So maybe do you think he's more of a second round pick guy?
2 years ago, pre-injury, I think you could have got a first rounder for him. Right. Now you're probably looking at, I'd even say a third rounder, just because the running back position isn't valued what it used to be. If there was a team really aggressive like Baltimore, I could see Baltimore maybe throwing in a second rounder just because I think they have 3 second rounders in this year's draft, so losing one of them is not going to hurt them as much. But I think you'll mostly probably get like a third and a fourth rounder for him, which at that point it does help you because worst comes to worst, if Tennessee wanted to package a couple of those mid-round picks to move up, they'll have the picks to do it at that point.
Yeah, and that really becomes the deal, right? What gives you the best option, right? Do you take 3 years and run 3 more years on them, hoping maybe you touch some gold, touch a little magic or whatever? Because you got to think, too, how many years does Hopkins really have on it? I think Hopkins has maybe, 3 or 4 years maybe left? I don't know. And I'm not talking at a high production level, but just, as a good receiver.
I think he's got the duration of this contract, which I think he signed a 3-year deal with the Titans. So I think he's got the duration of this contract, and then it's going to become more of, are you okay with signing a 1-year deal with me this year? Are you okay with signing a 1-year deal with somebody else the year after that? I don't see him getting any.
So yeah, one long or one, I guess 3 year, and then after that, he's pretty much down to year by year as it goes. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? So we can almost marry up DeAndre Hopkins with Derrick Henry in terms of we can get 3 years out of both of these guys, and you know what? I think I would be okay with that because I think it gives Levis enough time to grow as a quarterback with guys that can get the job done, and he can learn from receivers like DeAndre Hopkins, that had that experience. So and especially when you got guys like Trey Burke, who, obviously I think they lost him for the season and stuff like that. So,
you still have that Westbrook-Akina too, who's a nice target to throw to also.
I got to be honest with you, Stat Guy. I think if I'm Tennessee, I don't think I trade either one of them. I think I would just rock it for as long as I can, and then we just let him go. Because honestly, I mean, I get what you're saying. You can package a third and a fourth with this or that. And maybe that could happen, maybe for somebody, but you don't know how that's going to really turn out. And the third and fourth round for me, it's almost a wash. It's like a wash. I get 3 years of production out of Henry, or I possibly could get a third and a fourth. I think to me that's equal. So I say let's just compete now and see how far we can go with it.
I think Hopkins would be the most likely one to be traded, mainly because he's a wide receiver and more people value the wide receiver position than the running back position. So I could see Hopkins being the more likely one to be traded over Henry.
Yeah, I could understand that. But I don't think after this last game where Levis showed what he could do, and when they finally got that right chemistry between Hopkins and the quarterback, now they see what they actually have and what they can grow on. Mm-hmm. Why would you want to break that up when he finally looks like? I mean, I think you at least give Hopkins and Levis 3 or 4 more games and see what the trend is. If they continue to be hot and continue to produce like they're doing over the next 3 to 4 games, I think you keep rocking with that, and I don't think you trade them. And if it doesn't, and he kind of goes back to what he was doing, which is, was that kind of like nothing with Tannehill, then I think you let him go and you move on and you see what else is out there. You try to get whatever trade value is left in Hopkins.
And another team I'm going to kind of keep my eye on the next 36 hours. Well, now we're down to about 27 hours, I believe, until the trade deadline actually passes. The Green Bay Packers, who are sitting at 2-5 right now. Their worst start since 2005. Jordan Love is regressing every single game. It went from not being able to connect on the deep ball to now he's underthrowing receivers 7 yards downfield. So now he can't even get it to a guy that's running a 7-yard out. Packers can't run the ball. That doesn't help because when you have the ball first and goal on your 2-yard line and you're calling 4 consecutive shotgun snaps, you're not doing yourself any help anyways. When you have a 260-pound running back, you could just turn the ball and just hand it to him. But the Packers right now are kind of in a difficult spot too because you have Jordan Love and Sean Clifford as your quarterbacks right now. You're faced with a situation where you need to figure out if you're going to stick with Jordan Love beyond this year or what's going to happen. And then you look at the money that you have invested in David Bakhtiari, who's not even playing this year. You look at the money that you have invested in Jair Alexander, who's a classic case of I'm going to play hard until I get the bag, and once I get the bag, I'm going to suck because Jair Alexander is afraid to even make a tackle on defense right now. You have so many of these high-priced players that the Packers invested in when Aaron Rodgers was here, and now all of them are either not producing, getting hurt, or something's not right in that organization right now. And now the Packers are in a situation where it's like, we went all in for Aaron Rodgers how many years without really saying we're going all in, and we came up short every single time. And now we have a new guy in Jordan Love where we didn't go all in to help him this year. We were depending on all these young guys to step up and take their game to the next level, and it's not working. And when that happens, you basically need an organizational reset to basically kind of get on the same page. And that would basically mean the Packers, I think, are going to have to start selling off some of these assets, whether they want to or not.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that. And another thing, too, I was just thinking about is, it's just not another thing, another player I was thinking about that we haven't talked about that could be in the same situation maybe would be a Mike Evans from Tampa. How is he not? I know look, number one, he gave him a deadline. They didn't give him an extension. He said, if you don't give me an extension, I want to test the free agent market. And when you got to tell you he's going to test the free agent market and you didn't give him what he wanted as fair value, why would he not be on the trade value? Or why would he not be on the trade market to go to another team, get some picks, get something back for him so that way you don't just let him walk out the door, at the end of the season?
I don't think the Buccaneers will, and I think the reason why I say that is Baker Mayfield's on a 1-year deal. I don't think they're going to commit to Baker Mayfield long term after this. I think it was more like this was kind of that placeholder.
Right.
Kyle Trask is that backup quarterback who was with Tom Brady for 2 years as the backup, and now he's with Baker Mayfield. If Kyle Trask is the guy they want him to be, like if Kyle Trask steps in next year to become the starter, they need Mike Evans to be there. Because otherwise you're throwing Kyle Trask into a similar situation of what Jordan Love's in right now, where you're counting on a bunch of young guys to take their game to the next level, and they just can't do it. That's the one thing the Packers lack right now. They don't have any veteran presence in that wide receiver room. They're counting on Christian Watson. They're counting on Romeo Doubs. Both are second-year players. They have rookie and Jaden Reed. They have two others, Samari Toure, who's a second-year player, Jonathan Wicks, who's a second-year player. The Packers don't have that veteran presence in the wide receiver room where a young quarterback can count on. And that's the situation the Buccaneers are going to run into if they trade away Mike Evans. You're going to put a 25-year-old, basically rookie starter, Kyle Trask, in a situation where he doesn't have Mike Evans. It'll be a bunch of young and unproven guys that he's going to have to try to do something with. And the Buccaneers are going to need a guy like Mike Evans to at least help Kyle Trask in that first year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I understand what you're saying with that too. I just can't imagine. So you're telling me then, based on what you're saying, is that you believe that the Tampa Bay Bucks will eventually give Mike Evans what he's looking for in that long term. So you think that they do come around?
Yeah, I think it's more so they didn't. I don't think it's that they didn't want to sign him when he gave him that deadline. I think it was more they wanted to see where the team was sitting this year so they can kind of prioritize what they're going to do at the deadline, prioritize what they're going to do at the draft, and then they can focus on what they're going to do with the funds that they have available in free agency. Because you don't want to give them, let's just say, for example, you give them like a 5-year, $100 million contract. You don't want to give them that right now. And then all of a sudden, 3 years into the deal, you realize, well, shoot, we should not have overpaid for him because now we put ourselves in a tough spot versus you go now, it's like we have $40 million to play with this year. We have $30 million to play with next year. And then we have like $80 million to play with. We can give you a 5-year deal worth this, but you're going to get this much this year, this much next year. And then we can backload it so you get the heavy part of the contract later when our finances open up.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll see if that play works out. I got to be honest with you, stat guy. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I hear where you're coming from. I just feel like and maybe you got to look at all the way to the end of this year because right now Mayfield is getting obviously the quarterback. He's got that quarterback position locked down. So when you talk about Kyle Trask, like how long are you going to give Baker Mayfield their freedom to run before you would even or actually look at Kyle Trask and maybe give him the reins at this?
You can't. The division that Tampa Bay is in, you can win that division with 8 wins. And that's the situation Tampa Bay is in right now. New Orleans is technically in first place right now at 4-4. Tampa Bay is also 4-4. Atlanta's 4-4, but due to the tiebreaker situations, New Orleans in first place right now. As long as Tampa Bay is competitive and remaining in the hunt to win that division, you can't go away from Baker Mayfield because he gives you that best chance to win the division this year. Now, going beyond this year, Mayfield's not going to be the answer long term. Mayfield's not going to be their best chance to win the division after this year. But it's this year that if they're focusing on this year, Mayfield's their best chance to win that division this year. And if they remain competitive throughout the whole year, you can't go to Kyle Trask because that's not going to be their best chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I definitely hear what you're saying. And I guess we'll have to wait to see more to follow on that. What did you think, or what other players do you think would be out there in terms of availability? Like, who else do you think would be out there? Like, for example, we already know, I guess, or I should say they put the kibosh on Jonathan Taylor being shopped around. I guess Indianapolis has now come to grips that they're going to keep him. They gave him that 3-year deal. I think it was a 3 years. I think $42 million. They gave him.
3 years, 42, like $20 million guaranteed. I think.
Right, so they're not going to actually look to shop him at this point. Now that they just gave him that big contract. So if there was another guy out there that you think could be traded, or even on the bubble of being traded, who do you think that would? Or in your mind, who would that look like?
Yeah, this will be the last one that we talk about due to like time issues and whatnot. But I think anybody on New England, honestly, being that New England,
maybe Parker is Parker on the move. Juju Smith-Schuster.
I would have said Kendrick Bourne before he got hurt. But now that's true. Now that he's hurt, you got to take him off there. Juju Smith-Schuster, I think, has a 3-year deal, so I think he might be off the table just because he's on a multi-year deal. But you got to look at obviously Devontae Parker. You got to look at Mike Gesicki. You got to look at potentially Ramondre Stevenson. Bailey Zappi could be possibly somebody looking at Bailey Zappi if somebody wants to give Mac Jones an opportunity. I'm just going to throw out a random thing here. Why don't you swap Jimmy Garoppolo for Mac Jones straight up? Mac Jones had his best season when Josh McDaniels was the play caller in New England. Josh McDaniels is the head coach in Vegas. Why not try to reunite Mac Jones with McDaniels to see what he can do? And Jimmy Garoppolo got his career started in New England and went 3-1 or 4-1 as a starter in New England before they traded him away. There's a lot of options for New England at this point. And I'm fully convinced that New England's going to go for a quarterback in next year's draft anyways, especially when they wanted Justin Fields initially, and then when the Bears traded up to pick Justin Fields 1 pick before they got to him, I think they were just kind of forced to settle on Mac Jones at that point. I don't think they wanted Mac Jones. I think Mac Jones was just that best available option when they picked, and because Fields wasn't there, they just kind of took Mac Jones, and they just kind of hoped he would pan out. But now that he really hasn't panned out, I'm convinced that they're going to move on from Mac Jones and go for a Drake May, go for a Bo Nix or Jordan Travis or a Penix or a Caleb Williams, depending on where they pick. and go from there. And if you just traded away Mac Jones this year for Jimmy Garoppolo, even if you draft a guy like Drake May, Jimmy Garoppolo's only got one more year left on his contract. You can draft a guy like Drake May. You can sit him behind Jimmy Garoppolo for one season, and then you turn the keys over to him.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that. And the thing about it is I really thought once Bill O'Brien got there, because I know Bill O'Brien, correct me if I'm wrong, I might be wrong, but I believe Bill O'Brien and Mac Jones did share at least 1 year together
at Alabama. At Alabama.
Yeah. So these guys already had history together. We know what Bill Belichick brings to the game, and we know that in the first year, like you said, under Josh McDaniels, they got into the playoffs. Mm-hmm. But yet, they had that terrible year where they tried to do this defensive coordinator swap into offense, when it just didn't work out. And then they brought back in Bill O'Brien. I really thought that was going to be the thing that could get Mac Jones back on point, back on track, and getting his career resurrected. But it doesn't seem like that's happened at all.
No.
Which is crazy.
I just think it's one of those situations where Mac Jones is in a situation in Alabama where he was blessed with having Devontae Smith. He was blessed with having the best talent at every single position around him.
Right.
He got drafted to obviously one of the best organizations in the NFL with one of the best head coaches the NFL's ever seen. But it wasn't the most talented roster when he got there. And that's something that he was not used to. And that was always, and it still is, whenever you draft a guy from Ohio State to play quarterback or a guy from Alabama or a lot of these high quarterbacks that come from like really good programs, I'm always skeptical on them right away because they're so used to a situation where they have the best talent at every position across the board. It's almost impossible not to look like a good quarterback. But you know damn well that if you put up Heisman-type numbers for 3 straight years in college, you're going to be a top 3 pick when that next draft comes. You're not going to have the best talent at every position when you get to that team. So it's going to be a much bigger learning curve, and I think that's what you're starting to see with a lot of guys from these big-time colleges where you look at some of the best quarterbacks in the league, and I'll just throw Josh Allen out there, for example. Josh Allen came from Wyoming, a team that does not have a ton of talent at any of the skill positions, and yet he put up better numbers than Power 5 quarterbacks like Tua and better numbers than Jalen Hurts and a lot of these other guys that came from colleges that had the best skill position players. And ultimately, I think that's what a lot of teams are going to look at when drafting a quarterback is they're going to look at the talent that he has at wide receiver, the talent that he has at running back, put his numbers up against this person who might not have the same talent at those positions. And if those numbers are very close or very similar, you may go with the guy from a smaller college because he's doing more with a lot less around him.
Absolutely, and I know we're short on time, so I know you got to get out of here. But and we're not. I don't want you to ask us now. I'm just going to let everybody know before Stat Guy gets us out of here. I want you guys to know on Tuesday. I think we go live at noon, noon Eastern, at 11 o'clock Central. But on noon Eastern, check us out because I promise you, I'm going to ask Stat Guy if Bill Belichick never gets into the playoffs again before he retires, how will that affect his view on where he should be placed in terms of the greatest coaches ever?
We'll answer that. We'll answer that tomorrow.
More to follow. More to follow tomorrow at noon Eastern, 11 o'clock Central. Stat Guy, you want to get us out?
Yeah, that's all the time we got today. I'm sure tomorrow, with it being deadline day tomorrow, on our show at 11, if any trades break tomorrow, we're most likely going to announce it as it happens. I'm sure that depending on time and availability for people tomorrow, we may run another deadline show tomorrow and run it up right to the deadline to see what happens. But come the end of our week, it's going to be a different looking show, I think, because we are going to have a lot more trades, I think, to discuss later in the week once everything goes down.
It's going to be interesting.
All right. See you tomorrow, Jay.
All right. Get us out. Bye. Y'all have a good night. We're out.